Welcome to Kansas Ag Report. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's program, another Ag in the Courtroom with Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law. A couple of big issues we'll talk about. One, conservation easements and really the tax consequences of that and what the courts are saying, as well as more taxes. There's a lot of proposals floating around D.C. What should farmers and ranchers be preparing for? So we'll talk about that coming up. Also, we'll have features from the Kansas Soybean Commission, Kansas Department of Agriculture, and the Kansas Grain Sorghum, as well as our weekly updates from the Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion, a division of K-Coe Isom.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, KFB.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
In agriculture news from agview.net, USDA says fiscal year 2021 will be a good year for American farm exports. In the latest quarterly ag forecast, the agency says exports will total $164 billion. That will be the highest total in U.S. history. Ag Secretary Bill Sachs says U.S. ag trade has proven extraordinarily resilient in the face of global pandemics and economic contraction. He said it's clear that trade remains a critical engine powering the agriculture economy and the U.S. economy as a whole. This report projects an increase of $7 million in trade since the February forecast. USDA notes key factors include record export volumes of several commodities like corn, soybean, livestock, poultry, and dairy products. Another major influence is rising demand from China for American products. Kansas Senator Jerry Moran has reintroduced legislation to relax the U.S. trade embargo with Cuba. The neighbor says legislation's goal is to open up another avenue for profit for American farmers and ranchers. Moran says the current regulations are limited revenue streams for farmers, ranchers, and even manufacturers. The unilateral trade embargo to Cuba blocks American farmers, ranchers, and manufacturers, Moran says, from selling into a market that's just 90 miles away from U.S. shores. Moran also says at the same time, foreign competition like China are benefiting from our expense. He said the legislation will expand market opportunities for U.S. producers by allowing them to compete on a level playing field with other countries. Kansas Farm Bureau President Rich Feltz, studied by the U.S. Trade Commission, shows that lifting the embargo could potentially increase exports by 166%, bringing an additional $800 million to the U.S. economy. And he said having an opportunity to export things like wheat, corn, and soybeans down to Cuba would be a win for the farming community all across Kansas. That's Ag News. More at agview.net. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com. And agview.net, serving the Beef Belt and Western Corn Belt with reliable and relevant agriculture information. agview.net.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids, from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and LibertyLink that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
McEowen, ag law specialist and tax professor at the Washburn School of Law. Time for another ag in the courtroom. And Roger, we have a couple of big issues to talk about this time around. And one of those is really propped up again, and that's these conservation easements. What are they? What aren't they? What are the courts saying as folks are really up in arms about these?
Well, it's the IRS that gets excised about these because it gives the possibility of a farmer or rancher or landowner or really anybody else who's got qualified property, but the focus being for farmers and ranchers. If I've got land that has a characteristic associated with it such that there's a nice view shed that we could preserve or something historical about the property, then I can find a qualified charity such as a land trust and put an easement restriction on my property, deed the property over to the charity and get a nice charitable deduction for that, because the charity, of course, is a charitable organization that gives me a tax break. And I still get to use the property. I can still farm it. I can still graze it. I can use it for agricultural purposes. I can derive money from it, just like I was before. It's just it cannot be developed, and the view needs to be preserved, whatever the case might be. And we often see these in areas overlooking watersheds such as the Missouri River, the Mississippi River. There are some of these in Kansas and the Flint Hills. There are some of them out in the Great Bend area, preserving certain types of natural resources. So the Congress a number of years ago wanted to incentivize the preservation of that type of land. So they create this code section that says that if you grant a permanent conservation easement on your property, donate that to a qualified charity such as a land trust, then you can get a deduction for that. Well, as you can imagine, it's not just a tax break that's given away. There are a lot of requirements that have to be satisfied in order to comply with that and to get the charitable deduction. And IRS and Treasury have written the regulations behind the statute, and those regulations are very, very specific as to what the landowner must do to preserve the perpetual nature of the easement.
Well, it's one of those that has been in a lot of discussions, things simply like this. What you're saying is more from a tax benefit, rather than, say, if you give this to one of these organizations maybe could resell that, and somehow the federal government could be in more control of that land, or come in and do some things that personal property and property rights could be extinguished. That there's a lot of confusion when it comes to these.
Yeah, that's not the aspect that we're talking about today. That's something that's totally different. But what I'm talking about are the technical details that the IRS requires for the landowner to get a charitable deduction on the tax return. And Ken, many times, as I read the cases on these, many times the claim deduction is in the millions upon millions of dollars. I've seen these in excess of $30 million Because what you're doing is you're taking the before easement restriction value of the land and comparing that with the post easement restriction value of the land. So you're getting a value of that restriction, and that's your charitable deduction. One of the issues, and I talked to Judge Paris on the tax court about this a year ago when she spoke at my conference in South Dakota. And I asked her, I said, Judge, how many cases involving agriculture on these conservation easement issues are currently before the tax court? And she said there were docketed at that time over 150 on the tax court's docket. There are literally thousands of these across the country. And we have a case right now. Tax court decided it just a few weeks ago. It's now an appeal to the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. And the issue in that one is, what must the deed language say to preserve the perpetual nature of the easement in case government action by eminent domain condemns the land and erases the easement? That's the one thing that can make that easement non-perpetual. And there's a specific reg that says how you allocate the proceeds, and they're battling over the language in the deed in that case. And I'll tell you, that's standard language that has actually been used in thousands of cases. So if IRS wins that case, they're going to be able to obliterate hundreds upon hundreds of these conservation easements in terms of wiping out the charitable deduction. Judge Holmes on the tax court dissented in that case. And so the landowner has latched on to the Holmes dissent in the Sixth Circuit. We'll see what happens, but big implications potentially on the deduction side of things, depending on what the Sixth Circuit says.
Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law is joining us. Let's take a break, come back with more in just a moment.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and Liberty Link that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
We don't know, but a lot of discussion of ending stepped-up basis when it comes to transfer of assets upon death, or all these tax implications. What can farmers and ranchers be doing to kind of prepare themselves if and when this happens?
Yeah, that's a real good question. I don't have a clear answer for anybody on that one because for a couple of reasons. One, if this legislation does become law, we still don't know what the effective date would be. Some of this has a retroactive effective date back to the beginning of this year. Some of it would be effective starting in 2022. So that's the first issue that we have right there. And that does raise some constitutional concerns also if they try to impose a tax increase on a retroactive basis. But a lot of questions here. What if capital gain rate goes up? What if capital gains are imposed at death rather than when the heir sells the property? So is death the taxable event? Are we trying to shift to more like a Canadian system rather than in combination with the existing system that we have here? What if the exemption from federal estate tax goes way down, say to 3.5 to 5 million from its current level of 11.7? What does that mean for continuity of the farming operation? Would I have to sell off assets to pay taxes associated with death? What do I need to do right now? What can I do to help prevent that from harming my operation? You may have seen it. It was just a few days ago that University of Illinois Farm Doc put out a publication And they estimated that if these provisions, the change in the federal estate tax exemption, the change in the capital gain rule, if those were to become effective, the average Illinois grain farming operation would face an increased tax at death of $500,000. That's on the average. Kansas Farm Management Association data, they're getting ready to do the same thing. And I think the estimates are right now would be that the data is going to show something very common to Illinois. So, what can you do at this point in time? Well, be flexible. Check your existing estate planning documents to make sure you've got enough flexibility in the language in those documents to be able to deal with changes as they come in. From a technical standpoint, as lawyers, we worry about, or we utilize disclaimer language, we utilize certain types of trusts, but we're looking for flexibility in language that's not locking us into certain dollar amounts going to a spouse or going to kids, because that exemption could change. And so we want to have language that fluctuates to take into account any change that Congress might impose on us. Other than that, make sure that other pieces of an estate or succession plan are in place. We want to have powers of attorney in place. That's both for financial reasons and healthcare reasons. And we want to make sure that we have property titled appropriately and watch the joint tenancy issue if you have sufficient size. So, just kind of buttoning things up right now, kind of holding still until we see what the rules are actually going to be.
All right, Roger. Now, if folks want to learn more about these issues we've talked about and other things, you have a blog. How can folks access that?
Yeah, they can access that off my homepage on my website, which is washburnlaw.edu/WALTR, or just do an internet search for Washburn Walter, WALTR, and they'll find the homepage. And then down the left side of that homepage is the access to the blog. And you can also sign up to get an email alert when I add something to it. But I write about these things, have been frequently this spring. So all that information is there.
Well, I know it is travel time for you. You're crisscrossing the country now talking about these and other updates. So travel safe, and we look forward to talking with you next month.
Thank you, Ken.
Dr. Roger McEowen, who is a tax professor and law professor there at the Washburn School of Law, has joined us. Stay with us, more in a moment.
Premier Farm and Home has what you need to make your lawn the best in the neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Ken. We choose Premier Farm and Home for the professional look that we do ourselves.
Feel free to stop in. You can also visit our website at heycow.com.
Soybean seeds are in the ground and the crop is coming up. Now what? In soybean fields planted during April, watch for bean leaf beetles, armyworms, and thistle caterpillars, as the earlier greening of these fields allow a prime environment for these insects to lay eggs. Japanese beetles are likely to appear during June, as agronomists have already noticed grub populations. Check along field edges and pasture borders to monitor defoliation thresholds as the soybeans grow. For soil that sits in continuously damp areas of the field, damping off root disease in untreated soybeans caused by Pythium and Phytophthora may become an issue. This is characterized by soft, rotted seeds pre-emergence or wilted plants post-emergence and can result in a replant. When it comes to weeds, Palmer amaranth and other weeds are already emerging, so timely post-emergence herbicide applications are key to managing problematic weeds. Extension specialists encourage individuals to pay attention to mix order when preparing spray application mixes. For example, glyphosate should follow the Enlist chemical when using that product, and the volatility reduction agent should be added first when using Extend. For dicamba applications, such as Extend, a mandate set in 2020 requires an approved pH buffering agent or volatility reduction agent to be included for all applications. A number of tools exist for farmers that assist in managing seasonal issues, including the Take Action website and mobile app. More is available on this initiative at iwilltakeaction.com.
What if sustainability were synonymous with U.S. soy? If energy efficiency, water quality, and soil health help define U.S. soy's value, that future is here, the time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is committing to sustainability that's achievable, worthwhile, and enduring. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
The Kansas Department of Agriculture is committed to supporting ag education and FFA throughout the state, because we know that today's ag ed students are tomorrow's agriculture leaders and agriculture workforce. Usually during the beginning of summer, Manhattan is swarming with Blue Jackets as K-State hosts the state FFA Convention. This was the second year in which the FFA Convention is being held as a condensed virtual event. Although the FFA members couldn't gather in one place, that didn't stop the program from continuing to recognize outstanding members and chapters for what they have accomplished this year, as we honored recipients of Proficiency Awards, National Chapter Awards, and state FFA degrees, as well as Kansas Star winners. No matter how we celebrate it publicly, FFA will continue to make a difference in the lives of students in communities throughout Kansas, and to develop valuable leadership and skills through this educational program. Kansas FFA has a current membership of over 9,800 high school students in 220 chapters, and those numbers continue to grow. There are 6 new ag ed programs as schools across the state recognize the importance of ag education in both rural and urban settings. Ag education in Kansas schools combines classroom instruction with experiential service and work-based learning through supervised agricultural experience programs, known as SAEs, that give students hands-on experiences in workplace settings in their communities. Agricultural education prepares students for successful careers and a lifetime of informed choices in global agriculture, food, fiber, and natural resource systems. KDA is proud to support FFA, as agriculture education is the foundation for the future of agriculture. For more information about FFA or ag education in Kansas, go to our website at agriculture.ks.gov/aged.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
For Kansas farmers who are familiar with growing grain sorghum, exports can make up a critical part of growers' bottom lines. That's why there is a whole lot of optimism as sorghum planting in Kansas heats up this month. According to the USDA's Economic Research Service in May, U.S. agricultural exports in fiscal year 2021 are projected at $164 billion, up $7 billion from the February forecast, led by increases in corn, soybeans, and livestock, poultry, dairy products, as well as grain sorghum. China is forecast to remain the largest market for U.S. agricultural exports in fiscal year 2021, followed by Canada and Mexico. Fiscal year 2021 U.S. grain and feed exports are forecast at a record $41.2 billion, up $3.4 billion from the February forecast driven by corn and sorghum. Sorghum exports specifically are forecasted at $2.4 billion, up $300 million from February's projection on both higher unit volumes and volumes driven by demand from China. Both factors point to increased production of grain sorghum this fall. And for growers choosing to irrigate their grain sorghum, you can optimize your yield by keeping in mind a few key points, according to Dr. Brent Bean, Agronomy Director with the Sorghum Checkoff, such as keeping soil moisture maintained above 30% to a soil depth of 3 feet, using irrigation early in the growth stages to establish uniform stand, and the most critical time to irrigate when soil moisture is lacking, the boot stage, when head emerges at the top of the plant prior to blooming and grain set. Trials over the year have demonstrated how adequate soil water at this stage will greatly enhance yield. For more growing tips, visit Dr. Bean's Agronomy Insights at sorghumcheckoff.com. And for Kansas Grain Sorghum, this is Adam York.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at
The Kansas congressional delegation recently sent a letter calling on U.S. Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack and U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland to provide an update on the ongoing investigation of the packing sector. The investigation was initiated following the August 2019 fire at the Tyson processing plant in Holcomb, then broadened to include the initial market impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The letter, signed by U.S. Senators Roger Marshall and Jerry Moran and U.S. Representatives Tracy Mann, Ron Estes, Jake LaTurner, and Sharice Davids, pointed out the USDA report released last summer only focused on supply and demand fundamentals and did not address the question of illegal or anti-competitive behavior. It also highlighted the challenging marketing dynamics cattle producers continue to face and the concerns surrounding the historically wide gap between wholesale beef prices and fed cattle prices. The letter stated industry participants need to know if the current situation is simply a matter of supply and demand fundamentals, as referenced in the 2020 USDA report, or if it is a result of unlawful market behavior. The delegation indicated prompt reporting of the findings of the investigation would provide important information regarding what policy actions might be appropriate to address the situation.
Premier Farm and Home has what you need to make your lawn the best in the neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Ken. We choose Premier Farm and Home for the professional look that we do ourselves.
Feel free to stop in. You can also visit our website at heycow.com.
Mitch Dewar with Pinion, a division of K-Coe Isom. This week, weather has found its way to the top of the trade talk. The crop in the U.S. is off to a solid start. As of June 6, the USDA estimated the corn crop at 90% emerged and a condition of 74% good to excellent, which was down 4% from the previous week. Soybeans were estimated to be 70% emerged and 67% good to excellent. With a large portion of the crop being planted and emerged, the trade looks to the weather and forecast to trade for the time being. The upper part of the northern plains continues to be extremely dry, with those in Iowa and eastern Nebraska starting to need a rain as well. At the end of the month, the USDA will release the planted acreage report, which has been highly anticipated, as we could see more acres come to the balance sheet. Marketing your grain in any given year can present a large number of challenges, and in these times of extreme volatility, it hasn't gotten easier. If you are questioning yourself if you have sold enough, or if you think you have sold too much, looking into some options could be a tool to ease some of the anxiety. If you are interested in getting a floor under your bushels or looking for some upside on previous sales, give us a call at 888-452-8751. I'm Mitch Dewar with Pinion, a division of K-Coe Isom.
Well, that's this week's show. Be social with us at KansasAgReport.net or on our social media channels. Next week, we're scheduled to have a conversation with former Ag Secretary and former Kansas Congressman Dan Glickman. I'm Ken Rogers. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
There's so many people that come here across the state, being able to meet all sorts of people from seeing what their different backgrounds and the things that they grow and the workshops that they have here to kind of see what other people are thinking and people in their expertise, you know, that you can take back home and maybe implement or at least investigate more if it's something you want to do.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.